clock accordingly. I call Senator Lyons.
Thank you, Mr President. Well, what a mess Mr Malcolm Turnbull and his government have made of school funding, along with complete dishonesty to the Australian public and, quite frankly, incompetence. Remember their commitments, their promises, the unity ticket, the lockstep on Gonski and Labor's funding, the dollar-for-dollar matching on funding, which was on display at polling booths across the nation. That's the commitment they gave, and yet they continued to renege on it. Was it all just a hoax, unfortunately foisted on Australian school students, students who need a better deal, students who need a better funding model? Was it their unity ticket, their step-for-step, their dollar-for-dollar, a great big dishonest trick played on Australian voters by Mr Abbott, then Mr Turnbull, then the former Education Minister Christopher Pyne, and now Senator Birmingham? The $30 billion cut the Liberals made to school funding is the biggest single cut to education in Australia's history. Just a few weeks ago, the completely crazy thought bubble of the Prime Minister, Mr Turnbull, when he proposed the ridiculous idea of withdrawing all federal funding for our public education system. The Prime Minister followed up this crazy proposal with another crazy proposal that states could levy their own taxes to pay for the massive shortfall in the funds that withdrawing federal funding for education would create. So that would create, in our history, the absolute disparity between states on something we should have a unity ticket on and something which should be national, and that is school funding. Why should one state, who may have been able to levy higher taxes, have a better system than other states? That is the American system, and their system is a mess. And in some states, taxes are not levied at all, and parents are just left with a very poor school system. That is what this government, the Turnbull government, was proposing. But of course, I don't know what the Prime Minister was thinking, this crazy, crazy ideal, but every single state and territory rejected the idea, except, of course, my state. Why? Because we have a foolish Premier in Mr Colin Barnett, who, quite frankly, has no credibility and has himself squandered the mining boom and turned our economy, the great powerhouse of Western Australia, into a cot case. And he has slashed and burnt education in Western Australia to the point that everyone is speaking about what a poor job he's doing. So there he is, bailing out a crazy idea put by the Turnbull government. And this week, the Turnbull government changed their tune again, making announcements about a tiny share, just $1 billion of the $30 billion that they took out, that they ripped out of education, would be restored. Clearly, the jokers are in charge when it comes to the Turnbull government. To call this a funding increase and to add insult to injury, today in the Senate it was called yet another increase. Yet we know the Liberals said that they would match our funding dollar for dollar at the polling booths, and that turned out to be completely incorrect, a lie, a dishonesty that Australian voters had every right to believe in. But obviously, when it comes to school education, the Turnbull government, whoever the minister is of the day, clearly cannot be trusted. And so what have the states said about this latest thought bubble? Well, in Victoria they said, and I quote, "It doesn't matter which way Malcolm Turnbull tries to spin it, This is another Liberal broken promise and a bitter pill to swallow for Victorian students and their families. What did South Australia have to say? They said, and I quote, "We don't need more Commonwealth testing. We need Commonwealth funding." What did Queensland say? "If the government really cared," I quote, "about literacy and numeracy and prep and year one, then they would put their money into additional teacher aides in the classroom that make a real difference to student learning." And New South Wales, the great Liberal state of New South Wales. Well, they've been in lockstep. They've been absolutely in lockstep. They've been in lockstep with Labor. Labor's plan. They want Gonski. I was at the public meeting when the New South Wales Liberal minister announced, "We want Gonski." That's what he said. That's what he said. And he's in the Liberal government. Doesn't matter. Suddenly we make a distinction. Suddenly they make a distinction. Oh, he's a national. Oh, he's not part of us. Well, he is part of you. He's the Education Minister in the New South Wales government. He's outlived the ministers, the succession of education ministers we've had in the Abbott Turnbull government. He's been the minister for quite some time, and he's in lockstep with Labor. So what did this New South Wales minister in the Liberal National Party, the biggest Liberal National Party government of all the states, said? He said, and I quote, "New South Wales will continue to advocate for the full Gonski funding in its agreement with the Commonwealth Government." And he has said that over and over again. So he's certainly in lockstep. He's in lockstep with Labor because he trusts Labor on education. He certainly doesn't trust the Turnbull government's thought bubbles and endless commitments or promises to be broken as soon as the election's over. Those promises will disappear. Mark my words. Meanwhile, Labor has had a detailed policy in the public realm for months, a policy Labor developed with those who know it best, with teachers, with parents and with education experts. Labor will reverse the Turnbull government's cuts to education, and we will implement the Gonski reforms on time and in full. And certainly the Liberal government in New South Wales, the Liberal National Party government in New South Wales, believe us when we say that. Believe us when we say that, and they back us in on that. Labor's investment will mean more classroom support for students, early intervention programs in schools. It will mean additional literacy and numeracy programs, and teachers having the tools to better track student achievement. Earlier this year, I chaired the Senate inquiry into children with disability in our education system, and I have to say I was really shocked at what poor treatment children with disability have in our education system. And what's the Turnbull government done about their education? Nothing. Nothing. The government system and the non-government system told us absolutely in clear terms CPI match funding is not enough for them. Their schools, the Catholic education system, said their schools for kids with disability would close. And we met with parents who had to fight to even get their kids enrolled. And we owe it to children with disability to make sure that they get the education they are entitled to, not the crumbs off the table, not to attend for half a day at a time, not for pressure to be put on to parents to buy the aids necessary to support their education, to be treated as learners in our system, and that's what Labor will do. Labor wants all students to achieve their full potential. Our plan is about students, not postcodes. The Gonski Review clearly established that our current school funding system, the one the Turnbull government is clinging to, defines school outcomes according to postcode, not student ability. This is wrong, and Labor's education plan will change that. Labor is the only party you can trust on the education commitments we make. Fair education funding is in our DNA, and we will fight for it year in, year out.